Welcome to the second installment of Focus Fridays, where we talk to amazing educators in the marching activity. Last week, I had the distinct pleasure to speak with Ike Jackson. So if you didn't get to catch that, go back on our Facebook page and watch. And of course, we're also joined today by another amazing educator that we'll get to in a few minutes. And join us next week. Go ahead and start thinking of your questions that you want to fire into Mr. Mark Reynolds, who runs the Ohio State College Drumline. So if you have questions about the college audition process or what that's like, make sure to join us again next week. All right, Mark's a great educator. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk to. But today, it's a distinct pleasure to bring to you a friend that I've known for, going on 11 plus, 12 plus years. He is the director of Mapex Indoor, and he is the percussion caption head for the Phantom Regiment. Rob Ferguson, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome, man. Great to have you. Yeah, we have you and I have a history of making lemonade out of lemons, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We were certainly, our friendship started in some of the weirdest conditions over in Europe.
2008, yes.
It seems like such a long, long time ago. And so I guess if there was anybody I'd rather be in this boat with during this time, it's you.
Yeah, we've been there. We've been there before. So yeah, it's good to be here together. Yes.
Yeah, man. Well, let's jump right into it. So Mapex has just passed the 21-year mark. All right. Longevity in this activity is hard. How are you guys still doing it and doing it even on this level, an upward trajectory?
It's a great question. I've talked about it a number of times in different situations that I could sit here and tell you that when we sat down to start the whole thing in 1999, that this was the plan. This was not the plan. We never thought it would be this. And I don't think most of us who started back then thought it would turn into what it is now. The biggest difference for us these days is I have an amazing administration team, and I have a great board of directors. I say all the time that there's in a nonprofit like a WGI independent group, there is. We have to have a board of directors to be a federal nonprofit, but I have a working board that takes on a tremendous amount. And that's been the biggest single difference in the kind of the modern era of Mapex. There's no way we'd be doing the things that we're doing now without that, because for a long time, it started off with three of us, three friends that were our high school programs couldn't sustain indoors in the size of each of those. So we just went, hey, kind of on a whim, really. I mean, it was literally kind of a last minute thought, in like end of marching band season, hey, let's try this, And back then, you were in the activity early, John. Like we were all kind of hanging on for dear life, And it's a different activity now, So we kind of got to the point of structure over a long period of time, the first time we owned our own truck was 2015, So it's like we were around for 15 years, or 14 years, whatever, without our own truck, because we just couldn't make it work, And I think the difference now has been definitely the administration. I mean, like I said, a great working board of directors who are very hands-on. One of my best friends in the world, Corey Lutton, who came on a couple of years ago for us as an operations director. And for a long time, I was doing both those things, and it was just too much. So now we're in a position where I can focus on the things that I'm more passionate about, like the show and the education and the kids and the staff, and he takes care of all the things that I'm just terrible at. So, but that's been a real blessing for me. And in terms of what it's allowed for the organization, there's no way we would have two ensembles without that structure in place right now. That's been the other biggest difference is the bonus of a second ensemble and what that does organizationally, and then the stresses of a second ensemble and what that, forces organizationally, I think are the biggest differences.
Right. You talked about Mapex Open. When did the Open group come about, and what was the catalyst to say, all right, now we're going to take on this extra? It's a blessing and a burden all at the same time.
It's so well said. At the late 2015, Well, I should say this. A couple of times beforehand, we had tried some things and gotten involved with some other friends that were trying to deal with some independent things. We're trying to figure that out, but it wasn't kind of under our umbrella. And then we kind of said, we're not going to do that anymore. And at the end of 2015 season, Ryan Reed, who's been with our team forever and ever and ever, he's one of our front ensemble guys, he's run the front ensemble for a bunch of years, and a dear friend. Ryan and I will sit down on a Sunday night a lot of times, after rehearsal and have dinner and talk. And he'll always go, I know I'm going to think about this right now, but and he'll drop something on me, to get me, kind of from shutting down the end of the week. And we're sitting in my living room and he's like, hey, I know this is not what's on your mind right now. Cause we were 4 weeks out of WGI, something like that. But, and he just said, hey, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but what do you think about starting an open group? And my reaction was like, you're crazy. And because at that point we were still struggling for any kind of good, consistent rehearsal space. We'd been through a couple of years of difficult rehearsal space situations. And again, we just got a truck, for the first time. And we finally got our board of directors, like together working, all those kind of things. And his whole thing was we teach a bunch of high school programs in Northeast Ohio. That a lot of those kids, they want to go march matrix after they graduate. And we've been blessed that over the years, that's how we got matrix started, was a lot of our high school students just kind of going to matrix after they graduated or whatever. Or some of those kids we didn't have indoor programs everywhere, were marching. And so when it became time, we were getting more and more drum corps players, more people from outside the area, that were people that were moving into the area to march matrix or whatever. So a lot of our high school students coming out of like an A-class high school program, they weren't ready yet. So like if they're a snare drummer, they're coming out of their high school snare line, doing a great job as an A-class player. They're a section leader, and they show up at matrix auditions and they're not going to make the snare line. So then their next thing is like, well, what do I do? Some of them would choose to try to play another instrument. I'll learn to play cymbals. I'll whatever. I'll try to do something else. But if they want to be a snare drummer, that doesn't always directly help them in that path. And they want to march drum corps and that kind of stuff. So we kind of lost that ability for us to keep educating. And there were other great ensembles in the area that we would go, hey, you should check out this group or that group or whatever. But there were students that we taught forever. And so Ryan was like, look, I think we need to do this. And I'm willing to take on a bunch of that responsibility. I'm willing to give up time with the world group to help make that happen, which again, just speaks to his devotion to education. And so I was like, well, okay, and we had a section leader who was getting ready to age out that year, a guy named John Thomas, who was just an amazing ensemble leader. And we knew we wanted to get him back involved, but we weren't, we already had some staff set up. And so honestly, it was one of those, like, we finished the season with this in our back of our head. And I mentioned to the board of directors, and they were very much like, we're not against it. But the one thing they've said, and they've reminded me, is like, we're willing to support this as long as it doesn't mean we're going to take away from Matrix World. We're not going to split all of that up. We'd have to find a way to do two of it, not divide it in half. And that was pretty cool. It was my board just saying that. And I mean, that was obviously something that I didn't want to see happen. But, and then we start talking to, they said, all right, we're willing to talk about it. And we start talking to sponsors. And I don't even know if you know this, John, but I mean, like, it was literally Chris Hankus and Jeff Mulvihill. We just joined Mapex Majestic the year before. So we've been with them for a year. And we talked to some of our other sponsors, and they said, yeah, we can try to help, in some way. But the big thing was instruments, I mean, that's a massive piece. And I remember being on a conference call and Jeff just being like, hey man, like, is this, are you serious about this? And I was like, I mean, yes, and him just being like, we'll help you figure it out. And I'll never, it's Jeff's walked down the tunnel with us a bunch of times, and a couple of years ago when the open team won open class, I made him walk down with us because we would not be there without the support of Mapex and Majestic. We just would not be. I don't even know if you knew that, but yeah, it was like, that was the kind of like, okay, I guess we're doing it. I literally was like walking through Kent, Ohio on the phone with Jeff and Chris going to meet my board of directors. So it was like, I walked in and went, so I think we can do it. And we sat right there. We're like, okay, we're doing it. So.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, like Jeff and Chris, of course, our teams always loves any chance to help out Matrix, no matter what class it is.
Yeah, unbelievable. It was an unbelievable, just that kind of blind support. So yeah, I mean, and it's been cool. Year one, we had zero. We've never had competitive expectations of that group. That's what we joke. It's like we said every year, like that's not what this group is here for. This group is here to be new almost every year. I mean, that's we don't want to see, we want it to be a place where kids can come in and grow and keep moving. So we're not trying to hold kids there to make that good. We're not trying to go, we're only going to march so many members to make it more competitive. We want as many kids that are ready to do it that we have, that we can, make work in a show, to be involved. So it's meant to be this, transit, and it's been pretty cool. But I think it's a cool environment. It's a different environment. Honestly, the two ensembles are very different. I think that's evident to watch them in performance, but I think they're very different, and it's something we're pretty committed to.
Very awesome. Yeah. Both ensembles, watching them last year and, unfortunately missing it this year. But seeing last year and getting right up close, all the different days, the whole WGI week it truly was a treat, whether out in the lot or on the front row of the show at the Humbart Center or the Hobart, wherever it was. And we were all over the place because, I'm sitting there thinking, we got to go out here to get the open group, and then we got to get here to get the world group. And then you imagine what that's like from your perspective of, juggling both. And I don't envy you, but I'm glad you do it. That's how I really going to say it.
Last year actually was great because I was actually able to be at all the shows. I saw all 6 runs. That's not often the case. It just depends on how it works out. It's a little bit of chaos. That's for sure. But to sit there Sunday night or Saturday night, honestly, there's always a moment Saturday night when, for me, it's when, open just got finished. I grabbed some food, got the semi out of the lot, and then, I've got enough time to eat a hamburger and then get back into the lot for World. And I'm usually there, they're unloading with World. And there's always a moment for me where I go, holy God, this is crazy. We never dreamed it would be this, all the chaos and all the stress, so blessed to be able to do that, to get to be around that many kids that are working that hard, that are doing that much, and to have the support of, parents and admin and board of directors and sponsors. And, it's pretty crazy.
You get a ton of help. Yeah. That's awesome.
Oh my God. Yeah. Impossible without it. Well,
let's talk a little bit about Matrix through the years. All right. So you and your staff have done such a wonderful job of creating and programming in moments. We were talking earlier, moments that we would all love to have one of. And, some of the shows that you guys have done, just 2 or 3, just standing ovations. I can't hear, it doesn't even matter if they're playing well because you can't hear it anyways because of the crowd going on. So I want to drill down on a couple of them.
Okay.
In 2013, Covered.
Yeah.
It sounds like such a simple concept. It's one word. It just sounds so simple. But from that, you guys pulled out so many different moments that you're just like, oh, well, that's amazing. And it's all based off of just Covered. So how does that go? How do you get into that process, and how does some of those moments come about?
Well, that one's interesting because that one started with the paint. So that didn't start with the title. And some shows for me start with the title. More often than not, though, a lot of times they start with a list of moments, and then you go, how do all these things hook together? The shows I've enjoyed the most have been those. Have been the ones where I don't know what the title is for a minute, and then we have a bunch of almost like Legos, here's a moment and here's a moment and here's a moment, that these all share something, but I don't know what they are. And a lot of times I go, are these even the same show? And when those Legos start fitting together, then that's where it kind of happens. So that show started with the idea of a show that I've been toying with for, oh my gosh, maybe 10 years. That was originally, not a show like what you saw. It was a show where it was all based in fear, being overcome by fear. So people getting painted and the like the paint covering people, like painting people's costumes, so they were changing colors and being overcome by something. And I told again, go back to Ryan Reed and Donnie Ross, who's the director at Cap City Percussion, who is a former student of mine and great friend, and we were teaching drum corps together. And somewhere along the lines, this thing came up again in the summer of 2012, and they just on the bus, it'd be like every other day, they'd be like, all right, so let's talk about the paint thing again. And they were kind of just pushing me. And I had written it off. Like, this is a show that we're never gonna do. It's just, an idea. And then we kind of got to going with it. And then actually the Skrillex thing was the other piece of it. Was a lot of the members of the ensemble the year before turned me on to dubstep stuff. And it was funny. They were just a couple of the guys that were like super into that stuff. And it was always playing. And I wasn't into much of it. And Skrillex was like actually the first of the dubstep stuff I heard that I liked. And it was actually Cinema that I heard that I liked. And then, but decided I didn't want to use Cinema because that was the one that was kind of mainstream at that point. And somehow those two things merged, to be honest with you. It just, when we found the Skrillex stuff, that's when it kind of put it into a context. And that's when the whole thing got kind of like a little over the top street party. But the paint effects, the painting, like when the girls were being painted, like with the rollers and that kind of stuff, that was an idea from the very beginning. The dumping the paint on people and throwing the paint, those things were like from day one, we knew they were in there. We just didn't know what the show was about. So it started with those effects.
That is a very dangerous thing to do in WGI when it comes to the penalty box.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But you guys took great lengths to even match the floor to exit out to the back, to the ramp and all that. I remember when I talked to Kevin, he was like, oh, we figured this out.
There was a piece of tarp, back when the WGI tarp was beige, there was a piece of tarp, we call it our road. That was a piece of tarp that was like, I don't know, it was like 6 feet wide, and it ran from our tarp to the tunnels. We put it down, so when we were rolling our stuff off and it was dripping because it was going to, it didn't get on. And then we had a flap in the front of our floor that was under our front ensemble that was also beige. So you could, because there was paint coming down on, the drum kit and stuff. And then if you watch any of the video from that setup, that like the whole staff came on the floor with towels around their necks. Because we didn't know, any given night, it was not going the same place. Like it was, and we only ever threw all of it 3 times. We actually never threw all the paint in a rehearsal. That's the other part that people don't know. That makes me just nauseous saying, but yeah, we never threw all the paint in rehearsal. The first time we ever threw everything, all the paint went, everything, was state finals. And then prelims and finals at WGI. And everything else we'd done with we did some stuff with water.
Right.
Outside, but again, in Ohio, there's not a lot of rehearsals where you can do that. One day we were out there with like a ton of water, just figuring out how much liquid guys could get it in the air and that kind of stuff. And then we took like rolled up paper and put it in buckets to start just to throw it to see where it traveled to. But it was never, the guys would tell you on the floor, the guys that were marching were like, they never knew who was going to get hit with the most. Like it'd be this person one day, and the next day, one day they'd be a couple of, sprinkles on them, and the next day they're like head to toe. So
what was that cleanup like in between prelims and finals? Terrible.
Well, yeah, it's terrible. I mean, I had a bunch of alumni that that were like sets, like uniforms. They took uniforms from the parking lot and drove them to like a house in Dayton and worked on them all night. Because the uniforms were actually one of the hardest parts. The floor was a mess. We had gotten a second floor. That's the part that nobody knew. So we didn't clean the floor between prelims and finals. We went onto a different floor for finals.
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, we clean it because it's, even once you wash it, there was still a powdery layer on it that was really slippery. So you had to wash it and then scrub like crazy to get that off. And it's pretty hard to do. To try to do that overnight was going to be virtually impossible. So the cleanup was pretty terrible. I mean, yeah, if we'd have done it in this day and era with 3 shows, it would have been way harder to do it prelims, semis, and finals. I'd be willing to say we wouldn't have thrown everything in prelims. Right. If we had 3 shows, we would have done some kind of like, you know what I mean? Like bit less in prelims, like only like some of the floor buckets and not the vibraphone players and stuff, and then gone more and more and more.
They're just pouring out solo cups on top of the tenors for the,
I mean,
the first round.
That was actually the props they were on had grating on top of them, so the paint was going down through and being collected underneath them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually the least of the stuff everywhere. That the cleanup on their cleanup was a mess, like getting their uniforms clean and stuff, and the drums clean. But that the drums were actually the easier part, because it would just dry almost like, and then you just take like a credit card and scrape it off, and it just comes off into powder. So
awesome.
it was just flour. It was like a giant cake batter, basically. Yeah.
That sounds like something I would never want to have happen to me. I was glad I was in the crowd watching, but I was on my feet, and I was like, they're truly nuts. There's so many other great moments in there too, with the purple cloth over the tenors, the bright neon on top of the front ensemble, and then the cymbals covering up the snare so many times. Like that was like the visual, the audio. It was just programmed so well. And it's just
thanks.
Like what I'm saying, it's such a simple thing, covered. And then of course,
still one of our favorite. It's every year we do a history night, and the funny part is when we get, my heart is pounding when the closer starts. Right. To this day, if I watch a video of it, I'm like so sure something's gonna go wrong. Like still.
Well, if probably us and the Father Ryan guys were talking about doing a parody at one point, doing Scattered, Smothered, and Covered, and turn it into a Waffle House show.
Nice. Nice.
All right. And then just a couple years later, tell me how the show Mine came about.
That one's different. That one did not start from the effects. That started from, this sounds so cliche. Like I woke up dreaming about it. I've had a couple of those where like I'm dreaming about something and I woke up dreaming about it. It was actually, the dream I was having was about one of our former center snares, two kids, I guess, two young people who had been in our groups for a lot of years, and March Glassman for me and March Matrix. I knew he was getting ready to ask her to marry him like in a couple of months. He had told me, like, he bought the ring. He had a plan for a year. When she finished her graduate degree, he was asking her, and I don't know. It was weird. Like I pictured them getting engaged. It was really strange. It was like I was thinking about it and going, like how just they're both of those young people are, they're adults now, but really special to me. And I was just thinking about it, and like two awesome kids getting married, and so it was one of those things. And then that kind of led one to the next. And I remember waking up that morning and thinking about it, and then going on. I don't, just come up with the idea of Mine. Like right away, that was a title, and I iTuned it or whatever, Googled it, and up came the Beyonce tune, which I didn't know. And I pushed play on the Beyonce tune, and I was like, oh my God, like we're doing it. And I remember calling, my usual collection of people that I'll bounce an idea off of and said, we have to do it. And then it kind of became, some of the other music actually was from a former student of mine, and a high school student, snare drummer of mine, him and another guy that was doing a lot of EDM stuff. And I lost track of him. And after high school, when they were out touring with some stuff, and a friend of mine sent me that. And so it was like, there was an interesting bunch of things in there. And then Alyssa Owinski came to March bass drum for us, and we had a bass hole around Christmas. We still couldn't get filled. And so she's like, well, my boyfriend is like a really good bass drummer, and in March, like everywhere. So he came in, Zach Sterling, and he's a really good bass drummer. Okay. And those two were awesome. And, and so, and I talked about that. And in my head, part of me had gone like, maybe we're going to like create a fake proposal, but I'm not into the, I'm not into the acting thing. I kind of want it to be real. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And so we hadn't got the ending on, and I told the members about, the idea of what it kind of was. And it was right after the first show, Zach came to me and said, hey, I can still remember it, like where we were standing in the building, said, hey, like this has been such an amazing experience. I'm like, dude, you guys, you're awesome, man. It's great having you here. And he said, look, I've been planning on asking Alyssa to marry me soon. And I'm like, that's awesome. You guys are like Ken and Barbie, and I mean, seriously. And he's like, but if you wanted to use it in the show, you could do that. And I just was like, Zach, I mean, you understand what you're saying here? And he's like, no, I'm serious. I'm not telling you have to, I'm not pushing that to happen, but like, I have the ring. I know that I'm going to do it right after the season. I mean, I've thought about doing it finals night, out in the lot afterward. I've thought about, because we met in the activity. And so I spent about a week or two thinking about it, going like, holy gosh, I mean, we're talking about, and then we went ahead and did it. So nobody knew. And we programmed them. We're like, we were both in the baseline. We'll get the baseline of the whole closer. It works logistically.
Right.
And they were great. And I remember going to Alyssa, it was the next week at the Detroit Regional, and selling it to her, being like, I get this idea and I don't know what you're going to think. And I don't know what Zach's going to think. And Zach knew about all this. So I'm talking to Alyssa about it. And she's like, I said, I just don't know what it'd be like for Zach. Cause I mean, it's probably a little weirder for the guy to do that, cause I'm not trying to make any assumptions. I'm not trying to script your relationship, And so we're loading the truck after, I was like, Zach, come here a second. And he sits down. So I pitched the whole thing, even though Zach knows all about this. I pitched the whole thing and Zach's like, oh my God, dude. And Zach plays it up like no tomorrow. And
right.
I said, look, just think about it. Just think about it. And so I get a text from her about 3 hours later. They're driving home. She's like, hey, talk to Zach. We're totally in. We think it'd be really awesome. Like, let's do it. And then I get a text from Zach an hour later, says she literally has no idea. And so
that
we
is
went
incredible.
And so they did the fake one every single day.
Right.
And the first time they did it, there was some of the staff who knew. The first time we were putting that on with the Beyonce tune and everything, I had to turn around. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, realizing what's happening. And then, so the whole ensemble didn't know until the morning of finals.
Right. For our viewers, I actually have this on video, and we actually have probably the best angle of this.
Because you guys were in the tunnel.
You would let us know.
Yes.
A little bit.
There was a photographer down there with us shooting just them, and they didn't know why. But it was pretty. Yeah, I forgot about that. It's awesome.
Let me see if I can insert this in here real quick.
This is Alyssa, and
he's telling her right here that it's real.
Tonight, this is for real.
Because she didn't know, so they were walking up front. Yeah, wow. That's cool. The shot behind them is actually her little brother. Yeah, that's nuts. I don't know if I'm seeing that perspective. Right behind her, that shot there at the end was her little brother, who was marching top.
Man, what's that like? What's that like to create a soundtrack to somebody's engagement? And I was sitting there in the crowd. I was like, this dude has set the bar so high, obviously.
Honestly, it was. I teared up watching it a bunch of times before that happened. That night, I didn't. I've had it happen a couple of times where emotional shows, because I know what it is before anybody else knows what it is. Because there was only 2 or 3 of us who knew. The night we were putting that together for the first time. It was a Saturday night. I can still remember it clear as a bell. And we're trying to get the vocals to line up, and add 4 counts here and all that stuff. I knew what it was, and so did a few other guys, but nobody else did. So it's that was the part. So finals night, I just remember just smiling. That's probably the most I've ever smiled at a WGI final. I just was when we got to that point, I was like just laughing
Well, I
because
know that
I can see them, you know.
as far as G wise, it's like these guys hands down just took it. I mean, who's not affected by that? We have somebody else that wanted to weigh in on that moment specifically.
Hey, Rob. Hope you're doing great. It is crazy to think that it has been 5 years since we got engaged, and in May it'll be 4 years since we've been married. And there are still no words, and there never will be, to thank you enough for making this amazing moment happen for us. After so many years in the activity and to celebrate our love in that way on the floor at finals, it's indescribable, the feeling. From talking about it back in January to keeping it under wraps and keeping Alyssa in the blind about it all, there's no way it could have happened without you. And again, I will never be able to thank you enough, and I consider you one of our dearest friends. And
we miss you.
Miss you a bunch. Hope to see you soon.
All right, that's
right.
That's pretty awesome. Wow.
Yeah, man, what's that like to use an indoor percussion ensemble as a vessel that just started their lives together? It's incredible, right?
I mean, yeah, it's funny that see, now you got me like going down memory lane. It's no good for you. It's funny because you asked me earlier about, like the evolution of Matrix or whatever. Like that's where it all started to change right around then. And that show, honestly, because 13 and 14 are shows I really love. The Coverage Show and the Rockstar Show are just shows I really love, and they were so much fun to teach. The ensemble's freaking great. The guys are awesome. And honestly, the beginning of the 15 show, the beginning of the Mind show, is another one of it's another one of the Matrix. It's high energy, it's electronic, it's all the things that we were doing. And then the end of that show, like literally, it was January when we laid this whole thing out. And it's funny because it was right there at the end. It might not have been till finals day. Like rehearsal finals day was, you could have cut the tension in a room because everybody except her knew. It was bad. It was so difficult. And I remember at that moment going on the floor where that's probably the first time, John, that I just literally did not care at all about what happened competitively. Like that's the first time where I didn't want to go back into awards. I remember super clearly, like somebody being like, yo, we got to go back in. And I'm like, I don't want to go back in. I'm just going to stay out here and like keep tearing microphones off stuff. And they're like, Rob, you're the director. You got to go back in. I'm like, all right, sure. I just literally, the only thing I wanted to do was like be there to celebrate my kids and take pictures on the floor with them or whatever, whatever they wanted to do.
One of those weird times where the moment transcends the activity. It's awesome.
And John, that's the first time. That was, I think a lot of us say like it's not about the competitive thing. I think we're all naturally competitive. We're all trying to do something better than we've ever seen ever before. I mean, it's not the medal or whatever, but it's we're all trying to do something that competes against something. And that night for me, it literally changed everything. And I guess it's funny thinking about it that way. Every single thing since then, that's the last time the show didn't start off personal. Because that show became very personal, obviously. But it didn't start that way. Like Covered was it's not personal. It was just chaos, right? I mean, Rockstar was just chaos. Everything since then, if you look at every show since then for Matrix World, it's been very, very personal. And I don't hide that. And I guess that's where that all changed for me, was like thinking about things. Like, I want to use this as an opportunity to say something that we believe. And it's something it's not going what I believe and then I just need kids to go do that. Like, no. That we can sit down and discuss with the membership about what it's about and why. And the show would not be the same without those specific people. And that's the first show where I can say that, where like, without Zach and Alyssa in that group, that show's not the same. It's just not the same. We would have done some kind of marriage thing at the end, but I'm sorry, like we performed it a lot. And I remember Brett Kuhn saying he got a little choked up semifinals because he knew Alyssa And on the tape, he's talking about him getting choked up. And I remember thinking, like, brother, you haven't seen anything
Get
yet.
in line because
Yeah,
you gotta sit behind me.
This ain't emotional yet. And I remember coming out of semis and talking to Alyssa, and she's like, yeah, did it feel flat today? I just felt like it wasn't, the whole proposal thing was kind of flat. And I'm laughing in my head going like, don't worry, it'll be fine.
No idea.
It'll be fine tomorrow night.
Well, hey, let's change gears real quick from winter to summer. Now, you also are the percussion caption head for the Phantom Regiment.
Yes.
And so you do and between juggling one group in the winter and another group, having plenty of help with open, but then also heading up a summer program. I mean, what changes between writing for indoor versus Phantom? What's the difference between what does Matrix pull out of you versus what Phantom pulls out of you?
Almost completely different, which is awesome. I don't know if I'd want this. I wouldn't want the same thing year round. I think it would become numbing. I mean, it's already a lot of time and a lot of engagement. With Matrix, I mean, the concept work, like design, starts with me, like it, and I don't share it for the longest time. I have to have a pretty strong base understanding of what it is and what it feels like. And that's why I have to go, I know what it feels like, and I know what it like macro looks like. And in that situation, I do, especially now, I do like a dominant amount of the visual design and like the layout and the aesthetic and the production and that kind of stuff, as well as the music writing. With Phantom, I am part of a design team that is much, much, much larger. And I'm writing the battery in the front ensemble. And depending on the year and depending on, I mean, again, who all is on that team. I mean, like, for example, the year that we were about to have, the concept came in, JD Shaw brought the concept in. And JD's a pretty just scary global mind. And so like he comes in with like, here's all the major musical components, you mean, like all the macro stuff. And then we sit down and we started talking about what that was. You know, before that was like Will Pitts. It was a little more mixed of us musically, but again, there's somebody coming in with the visual thing. So the concept gets put together through a couple of different people, and then there's a lot of moving pieces in drum corps. And I think by and large, a lot of indoor groups, there are less moving pieces, at least, I mean, for us, I should say. For me, it's so different because I can become more like a little more tunnel visioned in terms of like working within something. There's already, like, again, this year's Phantom Regiment show, the 2020 show there was a concept. I mean, you know, and then there was a musical layout, and then, you know, and JD had, again, as like any drum corps, like the brass arrangers laying out, you know, large parts of it, and then going in and working within that and going, hey, what do you think about, you know, what do you think about extending this 4 bars, or what do you think about, you know, and us talking about some things, and then working with Evan Brown, our sound designer, and going back through and, you know, manipulating. But you're working, you know, again, like visually, I will still throw some ideas here and there, but like, again, Jeremy Hunt, Adam Sage, like those guys are in there. They're meeting independently, talking about some other things. What's the color palette? What's the color guard's role? What's the field layout look like? What do props look like? And we're collaborating, but there's different people running with the ball. You mean? Mm-hmm. In Matrix Land, you know, I have to be at the front of a lot of those discussions. Like, I have to go, what's the video role in the show going to be? Now, I'm really blessed that there are people cutting. It's not me cutting video. You know, I've got, you know, Alex Lewin in here, like manipulating video, and Peter Bates building video, and, you know what I mean? And when it comes to like, what's the floor look like? I have to have an idea. And I sit down with my graphic artist, and Jen is like manipulating, you know, that to go, what does he mean? You know, turning that. And I have a costume designer, and I go to Joe, but I have to, from an idea program perspective, I have to program coordinate and unify the Matrix show, where in Phantom Regiment, I'm working underneath a program coordinator that way. And I've said it forever, that I am much more drawn to the music, like coming at it through a musical lens, in drum corps, and coming at it through a pure effect lens in WGI. So, and I think, the nature of it, I'll be honest, it's one of the reasons I go back and forth with Matrix. There's times where there's some shows that I've really enjoyed that we did that if we just do a standstill music run, I'm like, I don't love it as much. Where I'm not gonna lie, one of the things I'm gonna miss a ton is sitting on the drum major podium at the end of the night with Phantom Regiment during move-ins, and we would take a music run every night just to keep that continuity. I can listen to Phantom Regiment play a standstill run and like hair on my arm standing up. In WGI, there's got to be the visual piece, and I think it's because I'm more involved with the visual piece that way too.
Right. Well, that's got to be, if you imagine you doing everything that you do for Matrix and then having to do all that for Phantom, I think we'd be looking at a very tired, sick, run-down Rob Ferguson.
Yeah, I just don't think that's not realistic. And I want to be hands-on with the groups I'm with. So Matrix, I was joking with a friend of mine the other day, I was home on Saturday in March, and I said the last time I was home in March on a Saturday was 1998. Because I'm never not going to be with Matrix unless, I'll judge a couple of times a year. So maybe I'm out on a Saturday to judge, or I'll get a clinic or something, but it's not a lot. I won't leave very often. And with Regiment, I'm usually 70 days on the road or whatever. I want to be there. I want to be in it. I want to be doing it. And so I think that part of it, and honestly, even on the educational side with Phantom, I am more hands-on the music in terms of teaching and all of that. And I've got James Sparling and Corey Dorn with me, who are amazing. They're my front and battery coordinators. So they're amazing. So they're just relentless in terms of what they do. But I'm super hands-on with that, where with Matrix, I do so much of my time is production driven for a long, long, long time, that I'm not the one managing every last musical piece of the tech staff are taking that on in the spaces while we're producing, which is, again, and the brand, John, I think that in a nutshell, the brand of Matrix is so different than the brand of Phantom Regiment. And I love doing the orchestral, symphonic thing outside, dark and aggressive. I love it. And I wouldn't want to do that much inside. And I wouldn't want to do the kind of more pop driven. I really love the way, which place I have, which thing right now.
I imagine it's being able to go to vacation in one place versus another because they're so different, and you wouldn't want to just go to the, merge the two. Well,
No.
Okay. So quick bit of fun here before we leave. Last week I got to talk to Ike, and I said put together his dream line, and this week I was wondering if you only could draw your inspiration from a Hollywood movie, what would Matrix 2021 be performing?
From a Hollywood movie. You didn't give me any prep on this, John.
For me, obviously, I'd see a 9-man snare line and stormtrooper outfits, but,
If I could draw it from a Hollywood movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's really hard. I'm not that into storytelling with Matrix World in terms of a character. I don't know. It'd have to be like a documentary kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'm a documentary guy. It would have to be because I constantly tell the members they'll always go early on well, what are we supposed to be? I'm like, you're supposed to be you. You just don't understand this part of you yet. That's why I don't ever feel like Matrix is incredibly believable at the beginning, because they're still trying to figure out what about them. And at the end, I think they're immensely committed because the story is theirs. I can tell you what we were doing in 2020, the story was theirs. It was very, very, very much their story. The together part, which was, a few of our guys, the hashtags together that, it was their story. So it would have to be some kind of documentary that way.
Of course, I knew it wouldn't be a simple. It's never a simple answer. You've got too many layers, Rob. You're always just we. Everybody knows when. Well, in my office, when we talk, we're just going to be on the phone for hours, and we're constantly learning about each other and how the process goes. Man, thanks so much for stopping in today and taking a little bit of your time to share it with everybody out there. I mean, you guys, Matrix and yourself, are really just more great ambassadors of Mapex and Majestic. We thank you so much for being with us, for bringing our instruments to life. One of the phrases you say is, "It's just metal and wood."
Just metal and wood.
You guys really make them.
Well, and that's the same thing on your guys' end. It's just metal and wood, but like the care you have, like the fact that you like play more is like you guys mean it, and that's the part that like it's been awesome. That it's so much more. Like our experience with Mapex and Majestic is so much more than the drums and the keyboards. I mean, we love the drums and keyboards, and they just keep getting better. Like the new Mark II stuff is freaking awesome.
Yeah,
but it's awesome because you don't stop. I mean, you're like the kids. They're never going to stop. It's only a matter of what they can get done in the time they have. Like they're never going to be like, oh, that's it. We're never going to be like, that's it. If we have more time, we're going to do more. That's what you guys do. So it's a pretty fun relationship.
No, right now it's just a little bump in the road, man. I promise.
More time to think about stuff.
We're dedicated. Music's essential, man. We know it. We feel it. All right. Well, thanks so much for stopping in. Thanks, everybody, for joining us again for another Focus Friday. Join us next week, Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have Mark Reynolds on with the Ohio State Drumline. We appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by. Stay safe out there. And now's a great time to practice.